Hi, I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And today we have a topic that I wrote lots of extensive notes on. Olga over here doesn't know anything about them. No. So I'm gonna sort of guide us into discussion here. The name of this video is Binging is Bad for Fandom.
As I'm sure the viewers know because they clicked
yes,
on
well,
it.
I'm setting it up for you.
I know.
So this is sort of my thesis here. Okay. And basically I want to talk about the Netflix model of releasing, specifically what I'm talking about is the idea of releasing an entire season at once instead of the older method of every week a new episode comes out.
And arguably the Hulu method where they do a few episodes usually together and then they do.
Although they're experimenting because season 1 of Runaways was 3 episodes at the beginning and then 1 week at a time. Season 2 was all at once.
There are 2 seasons of Runaways?
The new season that's coming out is going to be
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a good example of what I'm going to get into, which is that for me as someone covering Runaways, that makes it a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
But I want to talk first about what the pros of the Netflix model are, so that I can at least mention them before I get into destroying them.
Okay. So you already listed the pros.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, jump in. Whatever you want to throw in.
It's going to be more of a lecture than a discussion.
Well, no, it's going to be about I don't know. Maybe it will be. Where you're going to pop in with your own thoughts. I'm sure it will evolve. The first thing I put was fun. As a pro, it's fun to binge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why don't you tell me your pros and if anything is missing, I'll throw it in there.
I mean, it's convenient.
Yeah.
I'll say that where it's definitely it's almost like now it's trying to close the barn doors once the cows have gotten out. Like we've gotten accustomed to binging. Like,
are you from Texas or something?
No, I just like idioms.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a barn full of cows and they get out sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard. You can't go back.
Yeah. Like if Netflix ever changed their model, or again, we've gotten very used to it. So when I think Netflix, I do think I can watch it all at once.
Yeah.
So in the Netflix model, usually they'll end an episode and it's like, oh my God, it's a huge shocker, big thing happened, and you you need to click next. Like you can't stop.
To keep you on their platform.
Right. And I don't want to wait after I see something like that. Like I want to know what happens. I want to get there, and it's addictive.
Yeah.
There is no break. It's just an extra long movie a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas some other shows where they know they're doing week to week, they save those big cliffhangers for occasional moments. Yeah. And overall, it just feels kind of like a complete story in an episode.
Well, that's the thing that's interesting is because, cliffhangers at the end of episodes have always been a thing because the idea is we want you to come back next week.
Right.
But I do agree with you that they always sort of try to end up most Netflix episodes to keep you on the platform. So it's still sort of a similar idea. But each episode on a non-Netflix model has to feel like you got something good out of that episode in a way that Netflix, maybe it's like, oh, this is, it's just a piece of the puzzle, right? Mm-hmm.
So I guess a pro, since we're in the pros area of that, is I am excited by it. I am excited by those cliffhangers. I think it is an interesting way of how you have an episode that is able to still resolve the peak from the climax from the previous one and then go back into some story and character driven stuff and then go spike back up to grabbing you all over again in less than an hour. Yeah. And that's very skillful of trying to keep you in there. Yeah. And I'm not saying every episode is exactly like that. There are some breaths that you can take and walk away. Yeah. But a lot of their, especially action driven shows, they do that to you. Yeah, and I'm okay with it while I'm watching.
Yeah. The thing is, I think that it creates an event. Mm-hmm. It's fun. It's like, oh my God, guys, the new season of blah, blah, blah is out. Everybody's going to spend the whole weekend watching it. And it's it's fun to do that, right? It's fun to be like, I know what my weekend's going to be. It's going to be entirely that. And that wasn't a thing that we had before, right? Yeah. This is a new thing. And it's a thing where as TV is being splintered all across the place, and it was harder to have water cooler moments because everybody's watching different stuff. Mm-hmm. When you have, a whole season comes out now, everyone's going to watch because it's been so long since that show came out, you can have a little bit more water cool moments.
You can, but already to kind of push against that, it's as someone who has a very pop culture invested office staff, I have people to discuss shows with at work and have those water cooler moments. Some people really embrace the binge and they'll finish the show in one weekend.
Yeah.
Or most of the show. Yeah. And then you have people who are like, I would watch 2 episodes and I thought it was good, but I haven't seen more. And then you can't really...
You're not in the same place
You're not in the same place anymore. And someone will be like, I just finished episode 4. I finished episode 5. I just watched the pilot. And someone being, I watched the entire show.
And then it's like, okay, like a week and a half goes by and person C is finally done, but everybody else has like moved on to the next show.
Exactly. And it makes it a little bit harder where again you have to rehash those conversations. And some people are down for that. And other people are like, I already discussed this and got something out of it. So it's not like everyone's agreeing, all right, it's not a book club version of a show, you know, it's that kind of thing. But it's still fun to talk about people and be like, I like this character, and people know that who that character is, and you can say why you like them even in a spoiler-free way.
The next thing I had was you can go at your own pace. It gives you the audience choice. So you don't have to go by their schedule. You don't have to wait for the next step like you were talking about. It's I want, I have this free weekend. Say like I have kids and my wife and the kids go away for the weekend. I can be like, okay, now's the time where I'm going to watch all of the season because I don't usually have time. Like something like that.
A lot of the time too, I will wait for a show to come out and fully be done with all their episodes. Even though I could be watching it week to week, I binge it after it's done. Like, that's the thing with binge culture, where in some ways Netflix has set this up for me, where I'm used to doing that.
It permeates other shows.
Exactly. And is that bad for shows? Maybe sometimes, but also sometimes they wait to see how people catch up in the off season, and then they'll like renew it and see what they're doing.
Well, and certain shows are just, even if they weren't released as a binging show, they're just more palatable as a binging show. Like, I know a lot of comedies for me, if I'm watching an episode a week, unless it's like a really good comedy, I'm just like, yeah, that was fine, whatever. But if I have like a bunch of them to watch in a row, I enjoy it more.
Yeah, I do think comedy really benefits from that.
Another thing I had is you won't forget important things because you have just watched it. Right? It's not like, oh, this important thing happened and then 3 weeks went by and now I'm supposed to remember that one guy that did that one thing.
Right.
And, that's a lot. Even if it's, again, shows that weren't meant that way. If you watch Game of Thrones all in a row, you're more likely to remember, oh yeah, that random guy with that random name than you are if it was 3 months ago or something.
Or a year and a half. I will say though, to oppose that, you watch an entire season of a show all together, let's say even in the span of 2 weeks. But it's like 10 episodes in 2 weeks or something, or more. And then you have to wait a year for the next one. And if you don't rewatch, a lot of the time you don't remember the nuances of the previous season because you might remember them a little bit more closely to when you watched it the first time, but you don't process it in the same way when it's not a prolonged experience. You're not forced to remember that guy from episode 3
and it doesn't mean as much in some ways.
And then what? You're like, oh, that guy's important. Wait, what's that company that they're going against? Who's that? What are their relationships? And it makes it more difficult, I would say, once the show comes back.
Well, I mean, dipping into some of my negatives, there are times where I'll even just drop a show because it'll have been a year and I'll be like, I don't remember anything that happened in the last season. I don't feel like rewatching a season I've already seen. I mean, that's I fell off of both House of Cards and Orange is the New Black because of that. Whereas it's been so long since I've seen a season. What happened in House of Cards? Wow, whatever.
And then not every show you want to rewatch. There are some shows where I'm perfectly happy with it while I'm watching it and everything. But after a month, I'm like, oh yeah, I watched that. It was fine. It was good at the time. I'm cool with it. It's not a favorite. It's just a decent show that I enjoyed. And those are the ones especially that I think I struggle with. Do I want that time investment of maybe even having to rewatch episodes or read a bunch of recaps or Google while I'm watching the new season? And it's like, well, for these kind of arguably mediocre shows or these shows you're not super invested in otherwise, I think it could cause more drop off than a long-term investment.
One thing I did want to talk about, so this is the last pro I have before I really get into the meat of this video, which is in some ways, it's good for the fandom of the platform. Like, I feel like it creates fandom for Netflix in a way, right?
Loyalty?
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, I mean, fandom might be an exaggeration, but maybe loyalty. Somewhere in the thing, it's like people associate like their positive feelings for it as a whole in a way that maybe you never did for like NBC or something, right? It's like, you don't necessarily keep coming back for the same show. You keep coming back because they're constantly feeding you new things that you like.
Yeah. You can trust them to release stuff that you know you'll like.
Yeah.
And you're often pleasantly surprised by it. Like, you could probably, I know in another video you were saying, like, November Netflix isn't something that you're super interested in. I'm like, I don't know what's out there right now. Maybe if I invested a little bit more time, we would find a show that would be like, oh my God, this was really good. Or at the very least, like, a decent watch, or something from a few months ago where you're like, I missed the boat on this when it first came out, but I can do it now. That's the other part of it, of you can always find, it's like going back to the well, but in a positive way.
Yeah. All right, so diving into my issues. My issues. First one is coverage is hard for critics and fans. So, I mean, I am coming from a very specific point of view, right? Yeah. And that, like, I am someone doing TV content for YouTube, and obviously that's not going to be true for everybody. But it bothers me. I mean, I think that is important for fandom culture, where it's like, if Sabrina had come out over 3 months and I had been able to do a video every single week, I could have, interacted with fans on each episode, talking about the specifics of each episode, debating them, theorizing about what's coming up.
Yeah.
And it would have been something where I felt like I was part of a community. Yeah. Whereas instead I'm like, oh, I really like that. Now it's done for a year. And the theorizing... Sabrina's not a good example because they're going to have a holiday special.
But still, we don't know what that's going to be exactly. Yeah. And also the theorizing... It goes less week to week. It's more like, what's next season going to bring? Yeah. And that's a little bit more difficult, I think, and in some ways less exciting, because if you have like a theory, they can very quickly disprove it once it comes back. Whereas, quickly as in like, you're either fully right or fully wrong. Yeah. Whereas this, it's like, when it's week to week and you can really think about it, I think it's arguably narrows in the options. Yeah. And again, it's this community, it's this discussion culture of these threads. So either you have to self-control and find those like, posts and chat rooms, not chat rooms, but like Reddit, for example, it might be like a thread on this episode, and it can only be full of people that are taking it one episode at a time. And what if someone comes in who's watched the whole thing and they just jump in and ruin it for you? You know what I mean? It's just, I think that it's a lot more... You're relying on people to be decent.
Yeah, which you cannot do.
You can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, like, obviously, I mean, I think an easy answer to this video is, well, you don't have to binge it, go at your own pace if you don't like binging so much. And I'm like, but that's why I'm specifically saying it's bad for fandom, where it's like, yeah, okay, I could have watched one a week at my own pace and potentially put out a video once a week with new episodes, as I watch new episodes. That just would not connect with nearly as many people.
No, because most people who have access to everything, they're not going to wait that much time and take it apart in that way.
And much less people are going to be interested once they've seen the whole season and what you thought of episode 3. It's less interesting. I mean, and the thing is, and I really do hate having, like, I really like Sabrina. I'm like, I want to be a fan of Sabrina. And then that's like, Sabrina's a terrible example.
Yeah, it really is.
Sabrina's a terrible example because of the holiday special.
Say something else.
Daredevil, okay. I was saying, let's pretend Sabrina doesn't have the holiday special, because that's a new thing, right?
Okay. And it did get a massive...
Yeah, it's a new thing, and I don't want to say, like, Hill House, because I don't want a season 2 of Hill House.
Right.
So, like, I was a huge fan of that. Like, I want to be, like, all excited about Sabrina, but the fact that I have to wait a year now, it's like, it completely deflates me. And even if I watched it over like 3 weeks, it still would be basically a year. And so I'm like, I'm so excited about this. And then I'm just like, well, what is there to talk about?
On the subject of critique and criticism, the Netflix model has actually made things more difficult for like major reviewers and how they've had to handle things. So the big example of this, we just talked about it, is actually BoJack Horseman. I forget which website it was. I want to say IGN, but it might not have been. They reviewed season 1, but only episodes like 1 through 5 or something. And those are known as like, they're fine.
The bleh episodes.
But bleh episodes. And then the rest of the season took a turn, and it got people really invested. It was something really unique and powerful, and was more like the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Like, it set the tone for what the show has been in seasons 2 through, I think, 5 so far. And so it gave it a terrible review based on those first episodes. And then they went back and they edited their review. They changed it to include the full season. And now they base their reviews off of full seasons of things. Like, that was a whole thing where they changed how they review shows. So it even puts reviewers in this kind of weird spot, I would say. I mean, some shows, they only, like, give everybody episodes 1 through 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's just been this tonal shift where people, as in viewers, are like, well, I'm not going to watch a show until I know that my critic on this website I trust has seen the full season, and I know that I have to have the full season be perfect according to this reviewer to give it a try.
Well, and I would go as far as to say that it's just bad for the quality of the criticism.
Yeah.
Because so what's happened now, especially like if you watch IGN and how it reviews any of like the Netflix Marvel shows. So like as Daredevil comes out, they're clearly like maybe they got the first 3 or 4 ahead of time, right? And they review those. But they're like the episodes are coming out, like the reviews are coming out live as they're watching it. They watch, they immediately review, and they put it up. They watch the next one, they immediately. It's like, how can that be nearly as high quality as if you had one episode come out, you have the time to sit and write and really think about the show.
In the grand scheme of things, week to week to week.
Yeah. And it creates, I mean, and this is sort of coming back to the creator side, and not just me, but in general, where it's like, it creates this urgency where, like, well, a lot of times we end up doing pilot reviews because I'm like, I can't assume that me and my co-hosts are all going to watch the entire season of a show by like, you know, a week from when it airs. And if you're in the 2 weeks or 3 weeks away from when it originally dropped, you're just not going to get the audience anymore because people just care about it in that moment, and then it falls away.
Yeah, even if the people who finish it in a weekend or a week are somehow the minority, discourse drops off. Like, there's no denying that. It just does.
Well, the people who are rapidly gonna eat it all up really quickly are the same people who are big fandom people who are looking at that conversation. Another thing I wanted to talk about was TV became big because of the ritual of inviting characters into your home every week. And does this create a more detached connection to your characters? Do you not feel as though I feel like it has to create something where it feels less personal. Where, you know, when you have the ritual of, oh, it's 8 o'clock on a Wednesday, this is my show, and these are my people, and, you know, they warm like, knowing it's a Wednesday warms my heart because I get more of this.
Right.
I think that is something that really did connect people to TV in a way that was different from movies. I mean, that was what people always talked about, is you're inviting these people into your home. And I think and it's similar to the fact that I was talking about. It's like you forget things after you finish the season. You forget a bunch of stuff because it was like disposable in a way.
Right.
It's like we did the Sabrina video with Clara, and she had watched it like a week ago, and she couldn't remember specific details. And it's like, oh, I had a really good hamburger, and now it's done. You know,
I will say though, some characters though, in the amount of time that you see them, and having them just be fully, I don't want to say like in your face, but spending a lot of time with that character all at once. If they're really effective, and if there's something there that grabs you with them, they stay with you though. I would say that there are characters that I think about in the off season of shows that I'm really just like, I keep coming back to. And that's from spending like a short amount of time with them, but in a very intense way. So I would say you're not wrong. Like, I'm not saying that that's not true what you're saying. But it can be balanced, just to kind of now play the opposite of that.
I mean, that's why I wanted to not just do a video essay or whatever on this. I wanted to have some bounce back but on my point of view, I'm like, so let's say we take Rayla from Dragon Prince, who we both really liked. I feel like if I saw an episode once a week of her, I would have much more of like, I fucking love Rayla, as opposed to like my memory of loving Rayla. Like, that's what I have right now. I'm like, I know I love Rayla. Do I really remember why exactly? I mean, she was fun. Like, you know, like, but if I was watching week after week, I feel like I would be more connected.
I would say it's a little trickier with characters who are less spunky
Yeah.
and like fun.
Yeah.
When you have a character who's kind of a little bit darker or twisted and not necessarily like a positive influence in your life, like that's the thing where you can front load that and front load your connection with them and what they mean to you, and then it can stay with you. But it's kind of this thing of like you're not processing that like awful negativity in the same way as you forget, but you still remember your connection and you remember the moments.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways I feel like that comes down to the quality of the show, but also the number of episodes. Like I have to wonder how you would feel about Rayla if it was like a 20 episode, you know, or even a 16 episode season.
Yeah. As opposed
to like 8.
Yeah.
Like, whereas I think of BoJack, which is like, I think about BoJack a lot.
Yeah.
And he's a dark character. I don't know how I would feel if I had to wait 1 week between each episode to come back to the shitstorm.
It is true that tonally, it really depends on the tone of the show sometimes. Because if it is a depressing show, I don't know that like week after week I want to come back to Haunting of Hill House. But if I can just get through it and be done, it's a little bit different. It's just,
it's very tricky.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you were saying that, like I was like, oh, November doesn't have much that I'm interested in. Now imagine a world where September through December, we had Monday, Daredevil, Tuesday, American Vandal, Wednesday, Haunting of Hill House, Thursday, Dragon Prince, and Friday, Sabrina. We would have no worries about having periods of time where we didn't have a show we were excited about watching.
I suppose you're right, but I would feel overwhelmed.
With quality.
No, not just with quality. I feel like I would just be like, oh my God, that's too many show commitments all at once, and I can't follow. Like, I don't know which of those shows would drop off, but one of them would.
But that's the whole thing is that if you wanted to, you could still just wait until it ends and then binge it at the end.
And that's what I do with a lot of shows. But the whole problem with that model, though, is that if they're like, what's the week to week, like, if they're watching people drop off shows and they're not necessarily viewing like the binge at the end or in the off season in the same way, because they need to renew it. They need to know production. Yeah. Whereas they see a month where people are like watching the hell out of Sabrina and all of that, then, or like any of those other shows, they're like, okay, we need to prioritize that coming back. Yeah. And they clearly did. Yeah. Whereas when a show has something like that and they drop off, as all shows do, usually, like most shows do, they have the drop off of the season, maybe a spike back at the finale. Yeah. That's how quality shows get canceled. And I think there's a reason why the Netflix model is doing this. Like,
well,
I think
they also are canceling quite a few things.
They are canceling quite a few things. I'm not denying that they're not spreading themselves out.
I will say you made me think of another pro, though, which is that people are more likely to give shows a chance in some ways. It's like, oh, you know, say the first 2 episodes aren't great, but they're okay. If the next one just immediately starts playing, I feel like you're more likely to watch episode 3, which maybe is the first one where it's really great, as opposed to, you know, if I was 2 weeks later, I don't remember what time it was on, blah, blah, blah.
And then you see it on demand and you're like, do I want to take the time for this versus another show that I've been waiting to come back to or something like that? In some ways, it's like the sunk cost fallacy of, well, I've already watched half the season or like 3 episodes and it's fine. And then all of a sudden it gets really good. You're like, I never expected it to get this good like that. Going back to BoJack, that's what happened with me in season 1. If it was a week to week thing, I don't think I would have made it through, and I don't know how I could have believed people saying, "Hey, no, go back, catch up on episodes 3 through 6, actually, and then watch week to week because it gets really good." I'm like, well, will it? Or I didn't enjoy it. How is it going to save itself? Like, it can be a lot trickier in that way.
I think that's fair, but at the same time, and again, a lot of it comes down to like, am I just bitching and moaning? Because again, I could just make that schedule I came up with for myself and do it that way and have self-control. But again, I'm like, you lose the conversation. Like, if I was still watching American Vandal right now, I'd be like, who's talking about that? Like, you know, like,
who's talking about a canceled show?
Whereas, I mean, that's a different part of it. But like, my point being, like, it's, well, the other thing, you know, if American Vandal, like episodes 1 through 3 of this season had been really good and you're hearing more people talk about it, maybe people would have caught up before it got canceled, you know, like, and it's also just, it gives you something to look forward to every day of the week that way, as opposed to, we watched all of American Vandal in a 3-day period, and now I have nothing to watch in November. It's not, I don't love that. Also, so I wrote down some positives that I would see from weekly releases and, what that would mean for Netflix. I said discussions continue and are relevant for weeks on weeks. There's continuous reasons to go back to Netflix without having to flood the platform with quantity over quality. So that's something I want to talk about. So it's because Netflix knows you absorb their stuff and then are done and then looking immediately on the hunt for your next thing, they constantly have to pump in more and more and more originals to the point where it's you can't have a weekend come out where there aren't 4 new things.
Yeah. A varying quality.
And that's the whole thing. Yeah. Netflix used to be synonymous with quality, I feel like. And that's becoming less and less true as they flood the platform with as much as they can possibly muster. And you have things where it almost feels like they're bipolar in the fact that they'll have something that's pro one thing, and then the next week they'll have something that's anti that thing.
Right.
And it's what do you have any identity, or are you just greenlighting everything?
That's the whole thing where Netflix started off really not focusing on their originals. It was a place to go to catch up on other shows from other places. Yeah. And obviously there's still that thing of I finished this season, or I heard about the show, let me wait until it comes on Netflix for me to catch up. I never think branding is good. I don't think I can't wait until the show comes out in its entirety on Hulu. Yeah. Even though I think about it might be there. I'm the show might come out soon on Netflix. Yeah. That's the first place I go to look for a show. Yeah. So for me, they have my attention in that. Yeah, the name brand of that. Yeah. But they are so focused on their originals. Yeah. And I can rely on enjoying their originals, but I think my eyes just skate over a lot of their original content because there's so much of it, and I think a lot of it isn't trying to be good or appealing. Well, I mean,
why should we possibly be surprised that things are being canceled when they're putting at least 2/3 of the things have to be canceled given the amount of things they're putting out.
It's just more disappointing when something is A, a show that you really like, but B, something that feels objectively, critically good.
And definitely better than half the other things they're putting out. Yeah. Like American Vandal.
Yes.
I also said week to week makes it easier for people to catch up in a time that's still relevant. So say we were 4 weeks into Hill House, everybody's talking about how great Hill House is. You could still catch up in those 4 episodes, watch those in a weekend, and then be on track while everybody's still having the conversation. Also,
and that's the on-demand model of before, of where I loved having things on demand, where I'm I slept on this show and now it's halfway through the season. I can still catch up and talk about it with my friends. That was more of a thing that happened to me in high school / early college, whereas now it's just hey, did you see this show already? All right, let's talk about it.
I also want to talk about the writing issues. I think Netflix has continuously struggled with pacing, and it's very hard to create a giant movie. That is not a medium that existed before Netflix, right? They're basically making giant movies, and I think that has been mostly not good. If you look at things almost every Marvel Netflix show, people have said should have had 3 less episodes. Yeah. It's just you'll get to really critical points, and then they'll just meander for a while, and it's and that's with much less episodes because Arrow or whatever has 22, but it in some ways feels worse when you're watching Jessica Jones or something because it is made as a movie, and then you're oh, this movie has fat in it. Right. Because you're not oh, I remember episode 4 of Jessica Jones was my favorite episode. That's the one where blah, blah, blah happened.
I have a hard time remembering what happened in each episode. I can tell you moments, but I can't tell you that was episode 4 versus 5. And and that makes discourse more challenging. And I feel bad for writers too, where they're this was my episode that I really wrote. And it's oh, cool, you wrote this moment. But if you focus on the story of it, then wouldn't that be disappointing that people don't remember your full contribution that way? Yeah. I mean, arguably there are other shows where it's not people walk around just because it's week to week and remember the full episode of something. But
I do think, and I also do want to point out that I do think that there are growing pains with this writing method. They're getting a little bit better. I would argue things like Sabrina and things like American Vandal are more on the track where I'd be oh, I remember that episode where that thing happened. Yeah. But those are the exceptions, not the rules right now, I would say. I think if you look at almost every Netflix review, critics talk about the pacing issues.
I mean, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I will also say that pacing issues aren't a problem unique to streaming platforms / Netflix. Like, we criticize The 100 for its pacing issues.
Yeah.
A big criticism I used to always have when I was watching it, excuse me, of The Walking Dead was its pacing issues of also, like, rehashing stuff because they just have to fill a certain amount of episodes. Yeah. I would say even Game of Thrones has its own pacing issues at times and how they focus on stuff. Like, I think pacing is just a difficult thing to master. I've not studied this, but you've studied screenwriting and you've told me about that.
Well, I know it definitely is. At the same time, I think that they're taking something that's difficult, which is pacing, and making it even harder by virtue of being like, it's all just one long story.
Right.
Like something like The 100, we have some pacing issues, but it's clear that there's episodic arcs. And that the art of writing a good episode of TV is something that's been well crafted over years and years and decades. Whereas now they're just like, what even is an episode? Like, how do you break up this thing where it's just like a tiny piece of the puzzle?
Well, that's how I was saying earlier. I was actually complimenting of like the mastery of the ups and downs and this and that. But yeah, you're right. That can also bite you on the butt. And there's a bad way of doing that when it doesn't have its peak, or you overdo it in one episode and therefore you can't live up to that for like a stretch of them either.
I also think it's worth mentioning, I just thought it was as we were talking, the episode that everybody hates of
Breaking Bad?
Stranger Things Season 2.
Yeah.
Which I won't go into detail, but the whole point is that basically is, in some ways, people would call it a filler episode, or it's a very episodic episode, right? And it's like, and if, in some ways, if that had just come out on a week-to-week basis, that's in some ways expected. But when you've been watching for 6 hours straight and you just want to get to that conclusion, that is a lot harder to swallow, because I don't think that's a badly written episode. But people got so angry because it got in the way of their binge.
They did. Yeah, they did. But, like I said with Breaking Bad, thinking that's what you were going to talk about, the notorious episode people hate a lot of the time is The Fly.
Which they're stupid about.
I don't agree with that. But yeah, a lot of people don't like it. And I think my understanding of that is you're waiting every week for a phenomenal episode of television. And then there's one that does break the mold. And that is what that episode of Stranger Things did. And what if so it's almost like you skipped the week of the quality TV. And I feel like people would be just as mad of having to see that broke their pacing of getting there, something exciting. Whereas there, you just had to give it another hour and maybe you only had 1 hour to watch TV that day. You're probably going to get back to it in a day or two at the most if it's a show like that where you are really invested in it. And you had to wait 2 days. What if you had to wait 2 weeks after a show you hated? People got really mad at Breaking Bad for doing that. And I think they would have been still just as mad at Stranger Things.
And I think another example is that ties into what you were arguing is the beginning of season 3 of Lost, which people hated so much because they were waiting weeks and weeks to get over that bump. Whereas we watched it, we binged through. It wasn't our favorite part, but you get through it in a very short amount of time, and it doesn't really register how annoying it was.
Sometimes we'd be watching, and it'd be like, okay, you want to be done for now? And I'm like, no, we can't stop at that. Like, it's the same thing of when something really exciting happens, and I'm like, I can't walk away not knowing. I have to see. I'm not waiting 3 days or whatever. And it's kind of similar with this, where that was a mediocre episode, and I just want to be done with this area of this episode. Is the next one better? Because I need to get this bad taste out of my mouth. Like, let's go, move on and watch another one. So I think it's just such a highly personal thing. You've argued in such a way that I think that whether... Am I pro or anti?
No, I think you are pro binging, and the thing is, I think that you're making a solid argument that there isn't necessarily a better option, but I still feel like in some ways my initial thesis is getting drowned in the bigger debate about binging. Whereas
your whole thing is about fandom.
I think fandom specifically, I don't think there isn't really an argument for it being improved by binging culture.
So that's the thing. I may be pro, like in the grand scheme of things, I may be pro binging. But I fully agree with you that I think it is worse for fandom. I think part of what makes us, like, with our coverage of The 100, and part of what makes it great and fun and a community around it and a community of listeners too, that we can build a relationship with.
And have feedback come in and talk about it. And,
we could not have something like that with a streaming show that comes out all at once. And I appreciate that, and I like it, and it brings me back and makes me excited for a week, like a weeknight. It's something to look forward to on a crummy week, like something like that. And that is a little star when you're someone who likes fandom and is involved in fandom. Yeah. But if you're not super interested in fandom, if you just want to watch TV and enjoy it, and maybe draw some fan art later or talk to people at work about it once a week, you know, like at some point eventually, then binging isn't necessarily a bad thing. Yeah.
I mean, I think, I guess really, I think the real thing I was thinking about this was with the whole Runaways thing, where it's like, I had that week-to-week thing, and that was really cool. And this, the other thing I think is, as a creator, is it connects me to the show in a way that I will not be connected if I do one video about it. Right? Like the fact, like, I like The 100 more because I have a talk about it every single week. And even if I wasn't, my last thing I had on my list was live tweeting. It's like, you can go on Twitter and people will be talking about it in the week and they're binging it or whatever. But it's not the same thing of, it's 9 o'clock, everybody's turning on The 100, let's all talk about it and use the hashtags and as it's live happening to all of us together at the same time.
Right.
It's just
a live event.
It's just not the same thing. And I think that I just think it's a lot harder to form a solid community around something where people are watching it on their own time.
Yeah, I'll agree. I will also say, though, in some ways, not that this is a real culture, but meme culture. And the whole, like, internet trends, though, I think that binge culture is better for, like, those running jokes or like being like, I get that reference. Yeah. Like, for that whole thing, that momentary, like, I get what you're talking about. Yeah. And those cycles of things happening, and that is a very...
I don't understand why that would be better with binging versus, a big episode of Game of Thrones just came out and had this thing happen, now let's make a joke
you're right.
about
Game of Thrones does break them up. Yeah. Well, because that's, like, a huge... Like, that has such a major fandom, but I think these shows that otherwise wouldn't necessarily attract a wide audience, like, or a prolonged audience in the same way, I think that is a good way for it to permeate, because that, like, memes are a thing that people share. It's easily shareable and relatable and things like that. And it's a thing that it's like viral marketing in a way. And in some ways, it, like, you'll see them spike, especially for these shows that, again, like, someone might not care about it 6 months after it came out. They'll come back to it when the season 2, but they might not. But for that, like, month-long time after it came out, people are going to recognize it and care about it, and maybe it'll bring more people in.
Yeah. Well, I think it's worth mentioning, again, I'm thinking of things as we talk here, where I think an argument for binging is that it can make fandoms bigger. Yeah. I think that people are more likely... I think there are more fans of TV now than there ever have been. Yeah. I think that people are more likely to give things a chance than they ever would because it feels free and it's easily accessible and they can just watch a bunch of it and I don't really care about this, and they let their mind wander, and then they like 4 episodes and they're like, that was pretty good. I think there are more people who are more fans of more things. I just feel like the quality of the fandom is not as strong. It's just like people like things. I don't know if there are fans.
Well, that's the thing. Someone who watches it and gives it a chance and be like, I'm pleasantly surprised by that. That's not someone in the fandom. Yeah. Like, that's kind of two different things. Someone who watches a show isn't necessarily a fan of the show or B, part of the community around the show. They're not building the community. Yes.
It's more that quality things get more exposure rather than it helping the fandom.
Right, I mean, and then that's the thing for a company, obviously they want people to watch their shows, but something that a lot of them realize now is, we need to have this engagement with fans, and people need to care about it, and that's how we hold on to them. That's
CW's entire model, basically. Yeah. It's like, nobody watches our shows, but the people who watch them are bananas.
Hey.
So, yeah. All right. I mean, that's basically it.
I'm good. I'm all tapped out.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? What things did we miss out on? Or what things were we totally wrong about? Let us know below. Please subscribe, and I hope you're doing okay.